today is really focused on exploring these unbelievable times, the perpetual moment of transition, of uncertainty, and transformation that we're in with two of our co-founders, Bill and Lynne Twist, and for all of you for us to kind of come back to home base, to ground in possibility, to cement our sense of interconnectedness. So I'm in a little moment, I'll be inviting Bill and Lynne to a conversation. And but first, I would like to invite Lynne to open sacred space. And I think most of you are familiar and comfortable with it, but I like not taking it for granted. So whatever your orientation is to that word sacred, this is a moment to arrive. This is a practice we do with the Pachamama Alliance, and many people across the world do, to really acknowledge that which we cannot see, what binds us, and to just really arrive at the moment. And I wonder, Lynne, if you would be so gracious as to welcome us into sacred space.
Be my absolute delight. And it's so good to see everybody this 21st day of January 2021. 1/21/21. I like that. I'm going to ask you to lower your eyes or close them if you feel comfortable doing that. And I am going to read from Amanda Gorman's poem that she read so elegantly and eloquently yesterday at the inauguration of President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. Just some portion of that exquisite poem from the poet laureate, 22-year-old Amanda Gorman. So if you just relax into your chair, let your eyes fall shut, follow your breath in through the nose and then slowly out through the mouth for 3 long, deep inhales and even longer exhales. And each time you exhale, have it be twice as long as your inhale. And with each exhale, relax your body even more. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of a country and a time where a skinny Black girl, descended from slaves and raised by a single mother, can dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that isn't perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, and conditions of man. So we lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future, we must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek to harm none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true, that even as we grieved, we grew. Let's just be silent for the next 10 breaths as you follow your breath. The beautiful reciprocity, the give and take of the breath, always waiting for our attention, always waiting for our presence, always waiting for our love. And one more deep breath together. And exhale, open your eyes and smile.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Wonderful. Well, we have the distinct honor and privilege of hearing from Bill and Lynne today. Usually they are the ones hosting these calls, interviewing people, and they've agreed to, as two of the founders of the Pachamama Alliance, as wise elders, as clever, loving people, to share some insight in this particular time. So for those of you who don't know, Bill and Lynne Twist were two of the founders in partnership with John Perkins of the Pachamama Alliance. We are headquartered in San Francisco. Lynne is an author, an activist, a coach, a mother, a grandmother. She's a speaker all over the place, and our sort of pioneer grounded optimist at the organization. She has taught many of us and many across the world, really embodying a sense of grounded optimism, which we have needed to embody these times in particular. And Bill Twist is the CEO of the Pachamama Alliance. He manages, obviously, the entirety of the organization and is really and particularly grounded in our work in Ecuador and Peru. And he has brought the vision and strategy to so much of the organization. And we are really grateful to hear from you and for your generosity in bringing your insight. So
Mario, let me just say something too about you, because I think it's really kind of exciting that you're interviewing us. And that you represent, obviously, the role you're playing and taking such a critical role in the direction of our educational programs now. It's great for us to hear what's on your mind and respond to that. So I really appreciate you stepping up and saying you would love to interview us, and I'm honored.
Thank you.
Also to be interviewed by you. So thank you.
Yes. On behalf of all of the thousands of participants we have the honor of playing with, and the staff and the team and everybody here, I am very excited to engage with you. I love that you began with Amanda's poem. I wanted to as well. And I wonder if you would just give us a sense of how you felt witnessing that inauguration. There's so many different things to talk about, and in particular with what you witnessed on January 6th in the United States. What was that like to watch? What was alive for you? I wonder if maybe Lynne, you can start us out with what was that like? What happened for you? What did you see breaking open?
What you said, January 6th, did you mean that?
Even thinking back to that.
Oh, thinking back to January 6th.
Yeah.
Not January 6th itself. Okay. Well, I have always look for a way to see things that create a path forward. As you know, that's part of a grounded optimist job that I do. I always look for ways to see the seeds of a breakthrough in the breakdown itself. And my experience of January 6th was that we were throwing out, vomiting. That's a terrible way to put it, but given all of our shamanic practice that we know about, the kind of the peak of the ugliness that we are trying to throw out of our body politic, let it come up. Just like when you're sick, you want to get that which is no longer healthy out of your body. And it's almost like that rage, that anger, that unfortunate violence was like a purge, a bubbling up and like peeking out, and in a way that I think hopefully we won't ever see that again. and almost like it cleansed us to really see how deeply we have been lost over the last few years, and how many people are angry and enraged and unheard and hurt. And then two weeks later, to be in a kind of almost nirvana experience of seeing the beauty of our country, the power of the voices that are now coming to the fore, the more women in Congress than ever in history of the United States, more women of color than ever in history of the United States, the first woman vice president, the first woman of color vice president, probably the most experienced, whether you agree with him or not, the most experienced person we've ever in the history of our country elected as president of the United States, someone who has decades and decades and decades of experience, both life experience and professional experience. And the celebration being one that's unlike anything we've ever seen before, with no spectators, but this enormous millions and billions of spectators in a format that we've become used to. So to me, we have turned such an powerful page, and we are being not only reborn, but recreated, reimagined, reenchanted with what it means to be alive at this particular time. At the same time, honoring the 400,000 deaths and really pointing to the tragedy of that, but also how it's given us access to be proximate to the end of life as well as the power of life. You know, there's nothing like death to make you realize how important life is. So and then of course the tenor and feeling of the violence not coming anywhere near that celebration as people were fearing that it might, how powerfully that emergence of this next era was born. So I loved it. I was crying all the way through when Amanda Gorman stood up and gave her poem. I mean, it was pitch perfect, and that she is a young Black woman, only 22. It was like Greta Thunberg showing the way. The youth, the young people, the people of color, the voices that are now not only just being heard, but being featured. To me, we are in a place that is so powerful. It's not perfect, obviously, but so powerful. And I'm all about pointing out what is surging up and showing itself now. That's absolutely exquisitely what we're craving, what we hunger for, and what is so timely for 2021. In a way, 2020 was a year where we got 2020 vision. We were sobered, we were humbled, we saw what we hadn't dealt with, we saw what was unaddressed, and in 2021 we have the opportunity to come of age. So.
And I wonder, as you say that, Lynne, is your sense that this is to what extent do we relax into this, like, we're here, nirvana, and to what extent do, you know, in some ways I'm aware of, we've all gained and seen our own resilience and unprecedented levels of action on the streets and mobilizing around climate and justice. What does that energy, that history that we've just had in this last year mean now in this context of this president? How do you see that playing out right now?
Well, the opposite of relax. In fact, this is, you know, so clear. I mean, I don't need to say it, but I will say it, the most challenging time we've ever had in our lifetimes. None of the challenges have gone away. We just now have some signs of power and alignment that will give us the opportunity to step up. It's a collective job. There is no question about it. Every living human being is challenged as never before. This is a step it up, play your role, think big, don't relax, don't step back, step forward big time. I don't know a time when it's been more important to do that. And I'm just saying the power and possibility, the aperture, I'll call it an aperture, is so wide that there's room for everybody and there's a demand for everybody, even those who disagree and are heartbroken about the results of the election. It is an aperture that's big enough for everybody, and the problems are big enough for everybody. They're true 21st century problems in 2021 that will test and challenge every living being. So it's exciting to me. I'm so.
I mean, there's not much to add to that. That's what. That's the way Lynne sees the world, which is phenomenal. I have to report. One of the things that really struck me was how organized and massive the protest was on the 6th. And that was really shocking. And watching it on the 6th, it didn't show up as massive as it was. And seeing it unfold and what happened over the next several days, it just reminded me of how much work there is to do. And I think that's what Pachamama's work can be about and needs to be about, is how do we pull what looks like disparate factions together. I think ultimately, when we look at it, we'll see that it looks like there's a cultural war going on within the United States that's racially oriented or white power oriented. And I think it's a fiction and it's manufactured, and we can do something about it. And that's the thing that for me is powerful, was seeing that and seeing how strong this opposition was and how organized it was, and the call to engage that's being presented. And I think we can, and I think there are ways to do it. And that's a challenge for all of us. And it's a challenge for Pachamama Alliance and our work and how we engage people to bridge that divide, reach across, not to dilute our message, but to create a bigger context that has our message and the message of justice anchored in it, but puts it into a bigger context where people who feel that they're not being heard by what looks like the party of the left, by the Democratic Party, that we can somehow pull something, that we can pull people together. And I know we can, and I know we have to. So because we have to, we will.
I just want to put a point on that. I mean, you hear over and over again this growing split, left, right, progressive, conservative. You're saying it's an illusion. I mean, please say more. That how there is a way that we have lost each other, and we're grabbing at straws at what few resources we have amongst each other. But what else is there? Can you give us some sense of what you're actually pointing to?
So I don't think this sort of ties in with the Game Changer Intensive and the work we've been doing on the rigged game. And I don't think the split's a left-right split. The split's a top-down split. And economic power has successfully avoided any kind of democratic control over itself and has sucked the benefits of our society up to the top and left gutted the husk of our economy, and we're pitting, people are scrambling for less and less, a smaller piece, the bigger pie, but the pie is not being designed in a way that it's serving people's needs. And poor white people have suffered the gutting of industrial America, the growing inequality, the lack of any kind of progress for most Americans, not just people of color who suffer the most, but for other people too. And we've done the corporate powers have done a great job of creating a false dichotomy where the black, if black people get something, it's heard by white people as taking away from us. You're taking away from us, and we're suffering. We're suffering deaths of despair, of suicide, of opioid abuse, and then white people are attacking black people, and it's manufactured, and there's a reality to it, but it's manufactured too. And the issue is not a left-right issue; it's a top-down issue, and there's a rigged game, and we need to deal with that. We've got the ability to provide for everybody, and in fact, not only do we have that ability, we have that responsibility, and that's where we need to go, and that's where our work needs to go, and that's where our work does go with Game Changer Intensive and some of the other programs we're doing. And I know you're looking at how to be even more effective in those areas.
I feel like I want a shirt. It's not a left-right issue, it's a top-down issue. I feel like that is beautifully, beautifully put. Lynne, as you look at the sort of people power, the democracy, but people power, what do you see as possible in the future? And in particular, you've got, corporate power usurping our sense of interconnectedness. You've got left, right, but what do you see emerging that maybe 2020 broke open, but what do you see as possible moving forward with people power in particular?
Oh gosh, what a good question. Here's the real answer. I don't know. But I'll say something. It's so inspiring to me, the younger generations. I mean, as I mentioned, Greta Thunberg and Amanda Gorman are two amazing examples. Lila June is another example of one of the people that we work with, indigenous wisdom coming out of her pores, and she's so young. I'm not really answering your question, but it gives me the opportunity to say something about youth. And I know that Pachamama Alliance, our constituency, is really in the kind of wisdom department. We're wisdom keepers, but we also have a population of people, if you look on the screen, who've been around, for a while, who have a lot of experience. And to me, one of the things that we all have the opportunity to do is to be in service of, actually, these amazing young people who are not daunted by these incredible challenges, but emboldened by them. I just think about Amanda Gorman standing there in front of that microphone. If you saw her in her yellow outfit, 22 years old, not a nervous bone in her body, and so much presence. Or Greta Thunberg standing in front of the United Nations, or in front of the climate conferences, scolding people 5 times her age. I actually want to just say a quote that I use all the time from Buckminster Fuller, who said, he said, "Never forget that your children are your elders in universe time. Your children are your elders in universe time. They've come into a more evolved, more complete universe than you can ever understand except through their eyes. And I'll just say personally, Bill and I have a granddaughter. Her name is Ayodele Abdulhadi. Aya is we call her for short, and she'll be graduating from college this year. I mean, I know you can't believe we have a granddaughter that old, but we do. And she is totally into social justice, environmental justice, climate justice. She's going to go to law school. She's just on fire with the difference she can make with her life. Now, I know a lot of other young people are in despair and they don't want to have kids and they're scared about the climate crisis. But the ones that I'm in touch with, they're not, sitting there moping over everything. They're in action to turn it around. And I feel so, when you say people power, that's what I think of. That's what I think of. I think of these marches, these Friday climate marches that Greta Thunberg started that were the biggest marches in history. Those of us who've been organizing for years, we didn't produce anything close to those numbers, and all over the world. And then the youth that are running for office and people not being afraid to stick their necks out. So the people power that I see is young people. And I feel that if we as people in our, later generations, not everybody on this call, but I know there's a lot of us in my generation, I think the greatest, that book, The Greatest Generation, that Tom Brokaw wrote, people become great like that generation became great by going through the war. People become great by going through huge, almost unconfrontable challenges. COVID is an unconfrontable challenge that's ultimately going to make us great. The climate crisis, as Paul Hawkins says, is not happening to us, it's happening for us. The crises are multiple. Everything that's collapsing, as Buckminster Fuller said 50 years ago, every institution of humankind will be collapsing right around now, he said, in 1976. And we won't be able to fix these institutions because they're rooted in a paradigm that's no longer valid, a you or me paradigm, a scarcity of either you make it at my expense or I make it at your expense. And as Bill said a few minutes ago, the new paradigm, which has always probably been the truth, is you and I can both make it at nobody's expense. There's enough for everyone, everywhere, to have a healthy and productive life. And none of our institutions are sourced or grounded in that truth. They're grounded in a mindset of scarcity. So as they collapse around us, we can't repair them because they're rooted in an inaccurate understanding of the world. We will need to create them newly from scratch. And in a way, COVID and this huge breakdown of everything around us, the economy, education, even religion is breaking down, is that, to me, that prophecy, that prediction coming true. And to create from a whole new paradigm, it's not my age group that's going to do that. We'll bring wisdom to that process. But young, dynamic, visionary young people have the energy and the vision and the clarity and it's really the energy, but the power to create new institutions that are consistent with the world that we all want. And as we say in the symposium and in the Game Changer Intensive, we can be helpful by hospicing the death of the old structures that no longer serve us, and midwife, that is, witness and help those who are giving birth to give birth to the new structures and systems that are consistent with the more beautiful world we all know is possible. So the people power is where it's at. The institutions are breaking down. They don't work. They're failing us. So we need to create from scratch. And that's what young people do beautifully. And that's what they want to do. And that's what they can do. And they're ready, willing, able, and on the job.
If that's not answering the question, I don't know what is. I want to I echo that as you're talking. The institutions cannot be repaired; they need to be rebuilt. And in so many ways, the perspectives of the outliers, the folks who don't benefit from the system, like children, can't vote, can't do so much, they have in some way such a trustworthy perspectives because they haven't invested. And I just reflect on Black Lives Matter last year. This, when you've got nothing to lose, you can actually break through the system and actually in the process reveal for everybody the possibility of moving past structural racism or environmental catastrophe to something actually far more in alignment with what we see as possible. I like it. Bill, you know, when I first got here in, I guess it was 7 years ago, I felt really competent in the domain of social justice, felt like I could talk tons about it. And you were one of the first people to highlight democracy as the most important place that social justice is enacted and played out, and that without democracy, without a functioning democracy, the efforts of people power or social justice or environmental, actually saving ourselves from this crisis just aren't possible. So, and I know you were looking at that for a while. When you look out now, this is a big question, but how would you assess what is the health of democracy? How is it?
Big question. I'm trying to remember what we were looking at. I guess it's obvious obviously, I think democracy, let's see, it's a huge part of having a successful democratic experience for people is a huge part of having a system that takes care of people. It's just. And what we were looking at years back, and I think is still something we need to look at, and it's how this sort of gets to the top-down problem rather than the left-right problem. It's how oligarchic power or how economic power avoids democratic control. That's sort of that's the game that's being played. And it's how democracy works for people, but it works for people, the little people, to a certain extent, but it doesn't work where it needs to work, is bringing democratic control over economic power. And that's the thing we were looking at years ago. And I think there's a really powerful analysis that's done of that it was done by the Program on Corporations, Law, and Democracy, a man named Richard Grossman, who really looked at how corporations have subverted democracy, have cleverly avoided democratic control of corporate power. We have this idea that the most important thing in our society is somehow free market economic activity. That's antithetical to democratic control. And corporations have done this brilliant thing that has taken them 150 years to do, but they've gotten themselves into the position where they have rights of individuals. And that sounds like such a simple thing, and it can't be that powerful because it's so crazy. I mean, just corporations have rights is a big problem that we ought to fix. It's the fundamental problem. And it makes it impossible for democracy, for people to actually control economic power. And it makes it impossible for our democracy to respond to the needs of people. And that's why we have polls and 85% of the people want Medicare for all, and they want free education, and they want a clean environment, and yet our democracy, our legislative process can't get at it because the way we've got it set up is economic power can't be made subject to democratic control. So there are groups working on that. Move to Amend is working on that. CELDIF is working on that. We're working on that inside the Game Changer Intensive. And I think it's still the fundamental thing that's got to be addressed. This fiction of corporate personhood, it sounds so simple, but it's deep, 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 and it makes it so that democracy can't control economic power. And if democracy can't control economic power, we don't have democracy at the grassroots where we need it. So I think it's still a fundamental issue, and it's part of the work to be done to be able to work from the top, and to bring the top and the bottom closer together and spread the benefits of our amazing economic growth that we've had, to spread it amongst everybody, and to temper it so it's not destroying the environment at the same time. So for me, the whole issue of democracy and really digging into it deeply, striking at the roots of where the problems are, is what we need to do. And I think it's the work that needs to be done to bring people together too. And it can bring people together. In fact, I know there's so many cases where this issue of dealing with corporate power all around the country, it's been on ballot initiatives, red states, blue states, in Oklahoma and North Dakota and all over, and it passes with like 80 to 90% approval, when it's just people looking at what's right for them and what they need to have democracy in their communities. So I think it can be a unifying insight, and I really support the work that Move to Amend does, that CELDF does, that Thomas Lindsay does with all the work he's doing on democracy and environment. So I think it's still a big issue. It's a big issue, and it'd be a good idea. We ought to have democracy.
It makes me, as you're talking, it makes me think of Yachwar and different contexts of democracy. And I know that they've got a whole other set of pressures around how they're represented. But in terms of COVID and what the year was like for the Yachwar and where they are now, I'd love to hear an update. How are they? How's the work progressing? How were they impacted by COVID? Anything you've got to share, that would be great. Yeah,
it's actually a really inspiring or interesting, informative story. The Achuar in particular, and the indigenous groups around them in the Sacred Headwaters region in Ecuador, where I know a lot of people on this call. I've seen people who've been down there on our journeys. The Achuar have done really well with COVID. They social distance, they locked down initially. There was nobody going into their territory. They weren't traveling amongst their communities. And at some point, they watched what was happening, made the assessment that that COVID wasn't having a big impact on them. We know in our society, there are people that it has a huge impact on. And generally, it's people who've had an environment where they haven't had good health care, they haven't had good food, they're living in a polluted environment, they've had environmental pollution in their lungs, and people have suffered. And the Achuar didn't suffer from COVID. And at some point made the decision that they weren't going to, this is like a real political hot button, because at some point they said the cost of social distancing and not leading our lives the way we normally live our lives, because they're definitely a communally oriented people. They get up every morning together, they do things together, they do things at night together. It's not just one family, it's all families. And they made the decision that the cost of social distancing that was being suggested to them was much greater than the cost of COVID. And so I think what happened, they're robust. They probably breathe the cleanest air on the planet. They probably live in the cleanest environment on the planet. They don't have diabetes. They don't have heart disease. They don't have respiratory problems. And they've been able to deal with COVID very well, which is a great thing to hear. We were worried that it was going to be a new, like the measles or the mumps, that could go out and just wipe them out. And apparently it's not. It's an environmental, it's some marker of our environment, how we're destroying ourselves, human health, environmental issues, and the planet, destroying it its health as an environmental health. And the Achuar are fortunately not living in that world. They've been able to be, they're healthy and their environment is healthy. There have been people who've been living outside of the territory, living in the frontier towns, indigenous people who've spent 5-10 years living in a frontier town, which is one of the worst environments to live in terms of food, pollution, and people have died from COVID in those settings, but relatively minor impact inside. And it's something that I think tells a story for us too, because when we look, those who are privileged and have had good diet and good medical care and access to it and live in a clean environment have handled COVID fairly well. And where we see it's really hurt people, it's in communities that have been abandoned. It's where there's not access to health care, where there's not access to good food, environmental pollutants dumped in their territories. Indigenous communities in the United States have suffered horribly, and they live in areas where we just don't tend to them, and we need to. And many inner city people and Black people that have not had access to health care. So it's an indictment of our, of our society and the way we're organized and our priorities. And that's what we've got to work on from the top down.
Deeply appreciate that update. Blessings on them. Lynne, I wonder, I'm filled with good news right now. And I wonder, as we move forward, what are some of the pitfalls in us or in out there that as we move forward, we need to be conscious of and aware of, work with? What might we, as we move forward, really be and take heed of? What are some of the pitfalls we want to be aware of?
Gosh, good question. Mario, you're such a good interviewer.
I'm glad he asked you.
Oh my God. Well, we can't get lazy. We just can't. We can't retire. No retiring allowed. Maybe retiring from a job that pays you, but not retiring from making the world the place we want it to be. This is such a moment. To me, I say the 2020s, 2020 to 2030 is the critical turning point decade. It is the defining decade of the 21st century, but maybe of everything. And, Eckhart Tolle says, evolve or die. That's how he puts it. That's kind of short. Evolve or die, 3 words. And I really think that's kind of true. It's like we're poised for an evolutionary leap. A co-evolutionary leap. It's not just evolution, we're at the effective evolution now. We are so powerful as a species. We are part of evolution. We need to recognize the enormous impact we have on other species and on each other. And to get lazy or unconscious or take a breath or a pause or a relax too much. And I don't mean everybody has to work too hard. I mean, we need to be awake to the consequences of our actions. So I think the pitfall is kind of what you asked me before. I remember when Obama was elected, that was such a moment, a little bit like this one, but we didn't have all those crises at that time. We had crises, we always have our share, but nothing like now. And I think we did relax. I think we did kind of relax after Obama got elected, we being the people who were more on the progressive side of the spectrum. And I don't mean to insult anybody who isn't there, but I know that is a place where many people here reside. And that was a mistake. It was a big mistake. We cannot do that now. And we will not do that now. One of the things that's so great about how many challenges we have and how big they are, is there a match for humanity? I mean, We needed really big, giant, unbelievably unconfrontable challenges to wake us up out of a stupor. And we have them. We have them. And no one can escape them. The other thing that's so powerful is COVID's reach. It doesn't care whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or what religion how you pray. It doesn't care whether you're old or young. It's indiscriminately impacting every single living human being. I don't know anything in my lifetime that's been that comprehensive, that's forced us to see we're one biology, one biological system. So to really pay attention to that and not relax in any way that's irresponsible and reckless, that's a pitfall, I think. And I, for one, am all about, inspiring and motivating people to see this is the moment. This is our time. If you're alive, you have a job to do, as we say in the symposium. It's not a big job or a small job. It's your job, but do it. And so whatever it is that calls to you, I think we can trust the universe. The universe, the feedback is every living system is giving us the feedback that we need, including ourselves. Our bodies are giving us feedback. Our systems are giving us feedback. Obviously, the mother is giving us feedback. And as wonderful Arkham Lushwala says, and also Minari Shiwa, our indigenous guides, they say the virus is a message. It's an announcement, and it's not a punishment. It's an ally. It's an ally happening for us to wake up to what we need to become in order to evolve. Mm-hmm. So I guess the pitfall is not to think it's somebody else's job, but to figure out what your job is and to stay the course, And that's true for Pachamama Alliance too. Mm-hmm. We need to really be in our groove, stay the course, and do our job. So that's, I don't know if I said any pitfalls in there, but let's not fall into them wherever they are.
Stay engaged. I would love to hear, I'm going to open it up for a few minutes to folks who might have questions. Please, I think the chats are usable. Josh, I believe that's true. We're going to make the chats available. So if you want to pose a question, I will do my best to curate and pass it along to Bill and Lynne. Or if it's not a question, a topic you want them to speak on.
Wow.
We're looking at the questions. Oh my God. Wow.
And just go ahead and type in your question. Elizabeth, I think you've got your hand up, but if you don't mind typing it into here, that would be great.
I want to say something too. You go, but I want to say something to Bud's question, Bud Wilson.
I was going to say something.
You go first.
Well,
would you mind framing the question first so people know what you're answering?
Well, the part I was how to reach 70 million Americans who continue to support the other side, who didn't vote Democrat, who voted the other way. So this, I'm not going to address that directly, but I'm going to address the magnitude of the transformation that needs to happen. And a way I think we need to think about it that gives access to a transformation as big as we need. And it's a transformation that can bring people together, that does naturally bring people together, that allows us to organize to change our institutions, to be a match for this world that for human history has been a you or me world, a world of competition. And I think I see that world cannot survive. It will lead us to the extinction of our species. It'll continue to destroy the environment. It'll continue to break us apart. And unless we transform, we will die. So it's evolve or die. Yeah. We don't have, it's not a choice that we can say, oh, we should get ourselves organized. We don't have a choice. The transformation we need to make is so total. To switch from a you or me to a you and me world, give me a break. You can't even conceive of how to do that. But one way I think that we get access to it is when we see that we don't have a choice, that the direction we're in, we're not going to survive another 40 years, 50 years, maybe max 60, the human species will be gone if we keep going the way we're going. So how do we address that? One way we address that is we notice that may be why we're here. We ask the question and we start engaging with the question, what is the purpose of a life? I know it's not to maximize our 401k. I know it's not to just accumulate great stories to recount in old age. It's probably something like now for humanity, it's to build heaven on earth. That's why we're here. That's why these human beings are here now. And if we start looking at that question, like, what's the purpose of life? Why are we alive? Not the kind of questions that mostly we get caught in was worrying about our new car or something. But why are we here as human beings? And I think we're here as human beings. We've been here all along to build heaven on earth. And now we don't have any choice, because if we keep going the way we're going to destroy it. The only option is to transform, and it's to build the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, to create an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just human presence on this planet. But it's not just about a world that works for humans, it's a world that works for all creation and all life. And I think if we see that, well, we have to see that because there isn't any other choice. That's what we're up against now. And I think that is what can allow us to reach 70 million people. That's what can pull us all together, is all coming together around that. I mean, that's a big one. It's like, this is the end of evolution. This is what evolution has brought us to. As Lynne was saying, human beings are in charge of evolution now. And what we're here to do is to get it right, to make it work. And we have all the ability, we have all the tools, we have all the technology, we can do it. And we just need to do it. So we need to do it because if we don't, we die. And we need to do it because it's why we're here and what the universe needs and what the universe has offered and where evolution has brought us. So that's kind of my answer to Bud's question about a lot of other things he put in there. But one was, what is it going to take to reach across? And it's going to take a transformation of everything, of all of us. We think we are, who we know we are, why we're here, and asking the deep questions about what's the purpose of life, living in that. That's what I would say.
Then give him a hug from all of us, please. Yes. In a minute, did you want to say anything as well, Lynne?
Well, just what I want to say, that the 70 million people, I don't think we should focus on that number being anything other than people who were afraid of something and so voted in fear, not for something, and not even against something, just in fear. And that fear is being allayed. You know, fear is not the opposite of love, it's the absence of it. That's my view. And I'll just quote Mother Teresa, because it's always good to do that, especially at the end of something. She always said, she didn't talk much, but when she said stuff, it was really good. And she said, the unadulterated love of one person can nullify the hatred of millions. I'm going to say that again. The unadulterated love of one person can nullify the hatred of millions. And because we're so close to Martin Luther King Day, And if you think about that man and the love that drove him, and how what happened with the civil rights movement and George Wallace turning it, changing his whole orientation, love has unbelievable power. It's so much more powerful than fear. You can't be afraid when love is in the room. And so I think that's what we need to give to each other, including the 70 million people, whoever they are. I don't think they're stuck there. I think they were afraid. And I think when we refer to them as if they're in some ideological camp, I don't actually think that's true. I don't think that's valid. And I don't think it's healthy to think of them that way. They're human beings like us. They're afraid, they're scared, they have hopes and dreams, they have wants, they've got kids, and that's all of us. We're all in this together. So one of the great privileges I have is I'm part of what's called a donor roundtable that I've been invited to be part of. You'll like this, everybody. It's billionaires from the right and billionaires from the left who have formed a donor roundtable to work together on the climate issues. And I'm privileged to be invited to be part of that. I'm not a billionaire, but part of that conversation. And it is so inspiring to listen to the people who are quote unquote on the right about their love for this earth and the natural world, and how critical it is for them to work with the people that they used to call on the left, but now they're all in one camp called let's do everything we can to save this this privilege of being alive on this planet. So that's a little piece of hope for all of you.
Thank you. And I think I'm going to let that be our send-off as we close this absolutely unadulteratedly lovely conversation. For everybody who is here, thank you for coming. And sometimes these calls look like this, and sometimes they're more interactive with small groups and talking. And our next one is going to be in early February. So we will be sure to invite you. We hope you will come again to home base to recharge and reground in building the future our hearts know is possible. Bill and Lynn, much gratitude. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you, Mario. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Really awesome.
Thank you.
So
Bye, folks.
Bye, everybody.
Very good.
Awesome.
Partners.
Thanks, Lynn and Bill.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Lynn and Bill.
The world is full of possibilities.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. The world is full of amazing possibilities.
That's right.
We are in the have to jump in.
Hi, Anna.
Everybody, we reached it. We are in possibilities.
But it was nice. It was a nice visit. Really nice. So